A Georgia lawmaker argues funeral homes are not being scrutinized enough, and he owns a funeral home.
State Representative Rick Williams blames what he believes is a cozy relationship between the state board and the industry it's supposed to regulate.
Fox 5 I-Team reporter Randy Travis is back now with more of his investigation. Randy?
That's right, Courtney and Russ. We've already reported on one funeral home scandal, an estimated $250,000 allegedly pocketed by the funeral director, leaving dozens of people scrambling to come up with another way to pay for their loved one's services. Well, it's not an isolated problem. And you thought everything was fine?
I thought everything was fine. It was done.
Peace of mind.
Peace of mind.
The kind of peace you need when your final days depend on the steady hum of an oxygen tank. In 2016, as Vietnam vet Wade Reese was moving into the Georgia War Veterans Home in Milledgeville, he prepaid a Johnson County funeral home to cover his eventual cremation. Wrote them a check for $930.
Never suspected anything until all of a sudden bad news started coming out about Brantley Funeral Home.
In 2018, owner John Brantley was jailed on theft charges after allegedly misleading a family into taking the wrong cremains. His funeral home closed, and when it went, so did Reese's money.
It's very confusing because I assume that everybody's honest.
Not in the funeral business, at least not everybody. If you prepay for a funeral or a grave, you typically lock in the price. The funeral director is supposed to park your money in a CD or an insurance policy, and it's yours to get back if you ever change your mind. But what happens if your undertaker tries something underhanded?
Nobody is doing anything. The wheels are taking too long to turn. Something needs to happen.
State Representative Rick Williams has been in the funeral business for nearly 40 years. He worries Georgia consumers are at risk, and he puts the blame squarely at the feet of the licensing board set up to protect the public.
The cemetery board neglected doing their duty.
Last year, the owner of this Jones County cemetery was indicted for pocketing pre-need money from 44 customers. Investigators think Jerry Bridges stole around $250,000.
Where'd it go?
Widower Don Bailey lost more than $13,000. Each year, Bridges was required to send financial records to the Cemeterian Board, the state group in charge of licensing pre-need funeral sales. Board minutes show Bridges ignored the law, even after being held on contempt of court, and just kept selling for 15 years. Yet the board never moved to put him out of business. But you think the cemetery board let you down?
I know they let me down. That's what they were put there for.
Can you tell us if you're going to help these folks at all?
Oh, they'll get the money back.
They're going to get all their money back?
Absolutely.
How can you promise them that if you don't know where the money is?
I can't talk about that now. This is private property.
I think the whole thing fell in the cracks. I think that's where I see it.
We reached the Cemeterian Board Chairman Richard Parker by phone. He rejected the lawmakers' claim they let Bridges stay in business too long.
Williams wants to blame the Cemetery Board for something that we have absolutely nothing to do with.
He says they relied on legal advice from the Attorney General. But again, board minutes show the AG offered them the option of seizing the cemetery, but the board took no action. However, the Cemeterian Board just lost one of its biggest responsibilities. Shortly after we started asking questions, the Secretary of State transferred all prepay funeral licensing to the Securities Division, the same office that enforces other investment rules.
They specialize in that. They have, attorneys and people that are focused on people that are bad actors.
Could this also mark the end of the Cemeterian Board itself? There's already another board, the Funeral Board, responsible for maintaining health and safety inside the facilities themselves. Do you think we need two boards?
Well, that's something I think the General Assembly will probably be looking at, just because this spotlight has been shined on it. What is the best way of making sure that the public is really protected?
Already out nearly $1,000, Wade Reese had to pay another funeral home $1,900 to do what the first one could not. Peace of mind is not for the faint of heart.
What can I do now? I'm out to money. But, it made me a better man. I just hope nobody else gets hurt. That's all I hope.
Just days after our original investigation, Jerry Bridges, the one who's accused of stealing from 44 of his customers, decided to surrender his funeral director license. Unfortunately, though, Courtney, that will not get anyone back their money.
Yeah, it's certainly frustrating for the people affected by this. So some of the responsibilities already been taken away from the cemeterian board. What's the chance that it could go away entirely?
Well, it would take a legislative act, and Rick Williams says he's not going to introduce legislation this year, so it would be next year, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, we've got two different boards, but they kind of do the same thing, or at least the cemeterian board lost its biggest responsibility. So now it just sort of handles cemeteries, which you could move over to the funeral directors board. You could combine both of those boards. And the chairman said in our interview that he doesn't see a problem with that. So perhaps that is something that could be done in the future, and you know, protect the people of Georgia, because they know which board to go to. Because you know, people don't understand that cemeterian board and funeral home directors board, it's two different boards.
I never heard
which
of it,
one
yeah.
should I put it in? And pre-need funeral care is under one board, not the funeral directors board. So maybe it would be a little more understandable for the average citizen.
Good point. All right. Thanks
Thanks,
Randy.
Okay.